Okay, so for example 8, we have two functions being multiplied together. This function right here, as we take the derivative, we will get a 0, so we can do our tabular method. We let this be equal to u and everything else be our dv. We take our derivative of our u until we get to 0. We do our plus minus alternating. Remember, you have multiple parts here. If this was, this is just 2 parts, but if it was 3 parts, you need to make sure to use parentheses on the next one also, because then you'd have to distribute that negative, okay? But essentially it's okay here. But I put the parentheses just to kind of remind you. Whenever you have multiple parts, you should start using parentheses. Usually you should only use those if it's a negative, but it's just a good practice, okay? And now we have our antiderivative of our dv, which is e to the negative x. Okay, so we have to think backwards. We know that the derivative and the antiderivative of e to the x is e to the x, except we have our chain rule, which is -1. So we have to divide by -1, which is the same thing as multiplying by -1. So essentially, we are alternating signs. So here we have e, if we're working backwards, we have e to the negative x. If we take the derivative of this, we should get this. So let's check. So the derivative of e to the x is e to the x times the chain rule. So the chain rule here would just be negative, so it worked out. And then you see it's just repeating. Then we do our little tabloid method where we do our little diagonals and we multiply this and this minus 2x and this plus 2 times this. And then we're evaluating from 0 to 1. Okay, so here, to get rid of these parentheses, I take this and I distribute to the positive 1 and distribute to the x squared. And we end up with this little, sorry, I'm having a brain fart. We end up with this expression right here. We have our negative here, and then this positive green and this negative right here would make this negative. And that's where that came from, okay? Now from here, whenever you're evaluating, remember you always do the top minus the bottom. So I rewrote this whole thing. Instead of x, I plugged in 1. And then I subtracting, because I'm using a subtracting, I put brackets, and I plugged in a 0 for the next one, okay? So I plugged in a 1 for all of them, and I got this portion right here, okay? And then minus, this 0 times anything is 0, that goes away. And then we have negative e to the -0. You can either plug that into your calculator, or remember anything raised to the 0 power is 1. So because this is negative, that's going to be -1. 0 times anything is 0, so that goes away. And again here, you can either go back to the graph and figure out that that's a 1, or you can just know that anything raised to the 0 is 1, so we have that -2. We combine the stuff on the inside and get -3, and then 2 negatives make a positive, and that would be our final answer.